In Genesis 24, we see this sweeping narrative that says so much about the faithfulness of God's people and the faithfulness of God. But also in this narrative, we have the beginning of the love story and marriage of Isaac and Rebekah. And though we didn't touch on it in the main sermon, there's a lot to be seen here about how to follow God's will in the finding of a godly mate. And since we didn't deal with it in the sermon, it's a perfect topic for Beyond the Notes. You know, the book of Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun. And I have to confess right out of the gate that this list of principles that I have is not new with me. This is from Chuck Swindoll's excellent book, simply entitled Abraham. It's his study of the life of Abraham. And borrowing even his title, these are 5 guidelines for seeking a lifelong mate derived from the narrative of Genesis 24. And you recall the narrative. Abraham sends Eliezer, his servant, to go to the home city in Mesopotamia where Abraham had departed some decades and decades and decades before, lest Isaac find a wife among the Canaanite people, who were very, very prone to idolatry. Go back to where we came from and find a wife for my son. And so Eliezer undertakes that journey, and through much prayer and much God-ordained so-called happenstance, he encounters Rebekah, notes her astonishing faithfulness, and brings her home for Isaac to marry. Now, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the thumbnail. And so as we go through this, here's some principles. First of 5. First principle: when seeking a lifelong mate, hear and heed the counsel of godly parents. Now, I know, your folks don't get to choose your spouse. Although it is fascinating that in cultures that do or historically do have so-called arranged marriages, the divorce rates and marital contentment don't tend to suffer. Now, I will leave that for another conversation because there's no advocacy of sheer arranged marriages in our culture. But if you are blessed with godly parents and you're seeking a mate, let their views matter. In a lot of cases, particularly if you're a youngish adult, your parents remember your life in more detail than you do. And so in a sense, they know more about the story that God has been writing in your life than you actually remember. If they are godly, then their wisdom can be a valuable counterbalance if your commitment tends to be driven more emotionally and perhaps at less depth. If you have godly parents who care about you, you would be wise to take advantage of their wisdom. If they say to you, I don't think you should be dating that person, and let us tell you why, I wouldn't blow right through that if I were you. I'd pay attention to that. Do they get to make the choice? Absolutely not. Not in our culture. But you are wise to hear and heed the counsel of godly parents. Abraham here certainly had a tremendous amount of influence on Isaac and Rebekah, and the story went really, really well from there. Second thing, saturate the entire process in prayer. We don't invent God's will. We discover it. And God, who knows what he's up to, loves you a lot if you're his child, and he has in mind for you good things. And to the degree you walk with him, to the degree you invite his presence into the unfolding proceeding of your relationship, even at its very beginning, to that degree, that's a really good thing. Eliezer, who's not even named in the chapter. I believe it's Eliezer because we learned many chapters ago that he was the seniormost of Abraham's servants. He prays in this chapter again and again and again, thanking God for God's faithfulness, asking God to make his will plain. That's a good thing, to bathe the relationship and the potential relationships in prayer. I've heard of young parents who, as soon as their child is born, they start praying for the future spouse of their child. And I know of some amazing young adult marriages where the moms and dads who are closer to my age, sometimes even the grandparents who are closer to my age, have said, we have been praying that our son would meet just the right girl that God has for him. And we've been praying for our daughter to meet the right sort of man. And I believe God will honor those prayers. Number 3, look for qualities that reveal true character. Anybody can make a dressed up first impression. Anybody can be kind and polite and open on a first meeting. When Eliezer first meets Rebekah, she demonstrates the kindness and character that her culture's hospitality would require of her, in that she offers him water. They meet at the well, and she's there to draw water, and she's got her big 5-gallon jug with her, and so she draws water and she offers some to Eliezer. But any decent woman of that time would do that. But then, in the very thing that Eliezer prayed for, she offers to get water for his camels. Now, you know what? I've got two dogs at my house. One is our dog, and the other is a dog that Gail and I are taking care of for a while for a family that's off serving Jesus in a missionary setting. So I got my doggie and a foster doggie, and they're both big yellow dogs. And when I'm at home with those dogs all day, I bet I fill their water bowls 3 or 4 times. Those dogs know how to gulp some water. And the foster doggie is a yellow lab, and yellow labs are sloppy drinkers. So the Swiffer is out, because we're mopping up a lot of sloppy water. But it's nothing compared to, let me grab some water for your 10 camels. That's on a low average, that's 25 gallons per camel. Camels can go for a long time without drinking, but when it's time to get the camels a drink, it's not a sip. So 250 gallons of water from a 5-gallon jug, that's 50 trips to the well. 5 gallons of water weighs a little more than 40 pounds. That's 50 times 40. That's a ton, a literal ton, not a metaphorical ton, as in, wow, I ate a ton of food today. No, you did not. Rebekah moved 2,000 pounds of water for these camels. That is noteworthy. And I'm not saying that a woman's capacity to lift a ton of water is a test of marriageability. I'm not saying that at all. Of course I'm not. But there's something way beyond casual first impression that gets noticed in the sort of young lady Rebekah is. And if you fall prey to simply first impressions, so-called love at first sight, you could place yourself in tremendous danger of giving your heart to someone who in fact isn't worth it. So take your time and look for qualities that reveal true character. 4th principle, very closely related to the 3rd, proceed cautiously and think deeply. Be cautious about first impressions. One characteristic that Swindoll suggests, and I'm really, really in agreement with him, is get to know the person's family. Why? Well, as I have said in innumerable premarital and marital counseling sessions, you don't marry an individual. Well, I mean, I know you do. We're not talking about polygamy. But you don't marry a mere person. You marry a life story. And you bring your life story to another person's life story in the hope that by the grace of God and in the power of the Holy Spirit, those two very different life stories can be braided together to form the story of a brand new family. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't marry someone whose family's had some struggles. Whenever I hear anyone talk about a dysfunctional family, I smile to myself. I've been doing pastoral counseling for 40 years. I've never seen a functional family. All families are dysfunctional. The issue is, having looked at their dysfunction and knowing your dysfunction, can you trust God by His grace to make those two dysfunctions sing harmony with one another? If you think, well, her family is just perfect or his family is just perfect, you hadn't looked hard enough yet. You just haven't looked hard enough yet. Don't present yourself as perfect or your family is perfect. Don't have a lot of patience with that presentation from a potential mate. Get to know them. And yeah, you're going to find things that are a little quirky, a little odd, sometimes a little unhappy. But know those things and trust God with those things, and don't blunder blindly through those things as though they're not going to matter at all. They're going to matter. By the grace of God, you can deal with them. Just don't go blindly. And then finally, number 5. Determine, expect, in fact, while it's still in the potential phase, demand a strong shared interest in the things of God. Not somebody who pretends to be a Christian because you make it clear that you won't date someone who isn't. Well, I'm not dating anybody who's not a Christian, and suddenly they're a Christian. Don't trust that. Find someone whose interest in the things of God can be an authentic, binding part of your shared experience together as a couple. Rebecca didn't have the heritage of faith that Isaac did, but she had a fierce commitment to knowing and following the will of God, so much so that she willingly pulled up stakes and moved hundreds of miles in a world without video chatting, away from family and all that she had known. Isaac saw at the very beginning Rebekah's willingness to step out with him on the great adventure of what it is to follow the Lord together. You hold out for somebody who's like that, and while you're holding out for somebody who's like that, you be somebody who's like that. Well, those principles, I think, are all legitimately discernible from Genesis 24, and I hope that they will be profitable for you or for someone you care about or for some child or grandchild of yours who one day, I pray, will be seeking a godly mate. I hope by now that you're liking and sharing, subscribing to our podcast, and I will look forward to being with you again on future episodes of Beyond the Notes.